All right, welcome back to the channel. Here at Carnivore Customs, we believe jack of all trades and a master of none is far more beneficial than just a master of one. Let's go into the shop and see what we got going on. All right, so we got a few projects going on here. For you that are new to the channel, I'm the carnivore guy. I eat meat and I get stuff done. We've got an abundance of projects here. We got a snowmobile we're wrenching on. We're wearing out some chainsaws. Got a Chevy truck project that we're going to be getting into. Pretty nice truck. Beautiful, beautiful original kind of scenario over there. We've got a few motorcycles. Got some engine builds. And of course the shop dogs. Always cutting wood, always doing stuff, always getting after it. So anyways, we're going to get to the video. All right, welcome back. Carnivore Customs here. It's snowmobile season. We're going to be talking about used snowmobiles, purchasing a used sled, what to look for, how to troubleshoot some issues, how to foresee some problems, how to get the best value for your dollar that you can when it comes to a snowmobile. So I'm going to go through a bunch of steps. I'll list the steps, make it all nice and easy for you, and let's get at it. All right, let's have a look at this snowmobile. So purchasing a used sled, I believe the most important thing is you got to do a little bit of research. So this sled here, I've done my research. I have entered a Google search. I put in 2002 Ski-Doo 800 problems, and I've gone through a few chats and a few forums and see what people are having for issues and problems, and they seem to be generally pretty good. People are usually pretty happy with this model. The only issues it had a recall on a clutch spring, so we'll have a look for that. And they apparently were prone to blowing out the primary seal, which the crankcase seal, and the fix for that would be adding a crankcase breather. And that's a pretty cheap fix, so we'll have a look for that when we get the hood open. But the first thing I like to do is just have a look at it and see what general condition it is in. And this one's been sitting for years. This is actually a really nice sled. So I'm looking at the hood. I don't see any damage. I don't see any major scratches or anything. It looks pretty good. It doesn't look all twisted up or anything. Have a quick look at the general stance. It looks all right. Looking over here, it doesn't look like it's been rolled. I noticed this trailing arm has a decal on it. When I look on to the other side, the trailing arm here does not, so that's kind of a telltale. That could have been replaced. So I'm just going to take a double check. I'm going to stand back and I'm going to see what the chassis looks like, how straight it is. Generally, it doesn't look too twisted or anything. And then we're going to come over here and we're going to look at the mileage. And we see the mileage, so we're just under 5,000 miles. Make sure you know the difference between miles and kilometers, because there's quite a bit of difference there. Just look at the controls. Doesn't look too wore out. Everything looks basically straight. This one has reverse, so that's a good thing. Looking at the running boards, they don't look beat or banged up too much. We come around to the back. I look at the old license plate. It says 17, it's now 24, so it's been sitting for a few years. And the worst case scenario is we know 7 years ago it was running, so that's a good thing. And I like to look at anything rubber on the snowmobile, because that's going to be an issue in general, like intake boots, track, fuel lines, all that. You're going to have to go through that stuff. I also noticed, just from years of abusing sleds myself, I know if you roll it or you're really hard on it, you end up twisting your tunnel and all that. So I'm looking at the tunnel mounts, where the suspension actually mounts to the tunnel. I'm looking at the side. It doesn't look too bad. I see a crease here. That's where it mounts to. And that's kind of common. I've seen that on a lot of snowmobiles. So I go back over to this side and see if this side's creased. And yeah, it's got exactly the same little wrinkle in it. So it shouldn't be twisted. That's just it's an aluminum tunnel, so there is going to be a little bit of stress there. You could go and straighten that out, fix that, plate that backside in if you want to get carried away. I don't see it being an issue. The track looks good. I don't see any cracking on it or anything like that. So let's open up the hood and check for our problems that we found when we did our research. So just opening the hood, big heavy hood. Doesn't seem to be the hinges, everything doesn't look like anything's been broken. So that kind of tells me this thing hasn't been rolled, which is a good thing. I already took the clutch cover off, had a quick look, and I'm gonna get my flashlight out. I'm gonna look at that seal area. It's got a little bit of oil on it, doesn't look horrible. A little bit of oil from the front exhaust, kind of leaking if you ever flooded it or anything like that. That's kind of a common thing. I don't see an issue there. I'm gonna have a quick look here at the intake boots. And just from a glance, these things here, you can blow your motor if the intake boots seem to be cracked. They'll suck air, it'll run lean. I see it has heated carburetors. Everybody has their own opinion on that scenario, but we're gonna tear into this thing anyways once we finish going through it. And I'm looking in general, it looks pretty good, looks pretty stock in here. I'm gonna give the clutch a little rattle. Seems to be nice and tight. Feels like there's some good compression in there. We're gonna actually do a compression test. Primary stuff looks pretty good. All the factory insulation, everything looks pretty stock and pretty well maintained. So yeah, we'll go around to the other side. We're gonna look in the bottom of the belly pan here, see if we can see any evidence of any repairs being made. Just looks like it's been sitting for a while. I don't see any old rivets or anything like that. So that tells me this thing hasn't had major overhauls. Have a quick look at the wiring, look at the connections. All looks pretty factory. Doesn't look like anybody's hacked into it, which is a good thing. And then check the brake. Have a look at it. Yeah, it's rusty from sitting, not a big deal. And I find sometimes with these old sleds, you gotta deal with the brakes. That's pretty important because if your brake hangs up, it gets hot and you can light it on fire. So if that gets smoking hot and you don't notice it, and usually with big sleds, you don't notice it as easy because they got enough torque. It's not like slowing you right down. That'll get hot. And if it did, it would cause big problems because that's your oil right there. That's your little ECM setup. And if that ever got so hot that it wanted to light on fire, you'd have a huge mess. So I'm gonna check that. So it's got no brake. So I'm gonna bleed the brake, go through that, or at least mention it if I'm gonna make a purchase, and definitely deal with that issue. The seat is gorgeous. I don't see any tears or scratches or anything like that. In general, my first glance looking at the machine, I'm pretty impressed on how nice of a shape it's in for its age. And we're gonna move to the next step. All right, step number 2, we gotta find out what the status of this engine is. And the simplest way to do that is a compression test. A compression tester is relatively inexpensive. I've got one here. I'm going to pull a few spark plugs. I'm going to pull the spark plugs out. I'm going to look at the plugs. That'll kind of tell me what was going on. The last time it was kind of running. And I'm going to do a compression test. If you're buying a sled and the person that you're purchasing the sled from is not in favor of you doing a compression test, there's probably a reason. And I would kind of steer away from that. Most people got no issue. Pull the plugs, do a compression test, and it'll tell you a lot from there. So let's do that. All right, we've pulled the spark plugs out. We're gonna have a quick look at the spark plugs. Let's see if we can get her to focus. Plug doesn't look too bad. They seem to be gapped equally. Doesn't look like it's horrible. No signs of impact or anything. That one's a little wet, but I was kind of pulling it over. Okay, so let's get the compression tester in there. All right, we got our compression tester hooked up. We'll keep an eye on the needle. We're hoping for 120 pounds. Different compression testers test different. What I'm hoping for is the same compression in each one. I noticed I pulled it through. This one's got some fluid in it already, so it's kind of that carburetor must have a stuck float or something, and it is pouring fuel in there. You'll get a little bit of a different reading between a wet and dry test, but let's give this thing a few pulls and see what it says. Wow, it says it's full of oil. So that's not a good thing. So let's look through that issue. All right, we pulled this thing through and one of the cylinders full of oil and gas. So that tells us immediately that we have a carburetor issue, which I was kind of aware of because it's been sitting for a long time. But so I put a rag over top so I don't make a bigger mess than I already have. And let's see how much compression we can actually get out of this thing if we start pulling it decently. All right, hopefully we don't get a big mess. So that shows me on my gauge we got about 90 pounds. It's dropping just because I probably, yeah, so 90 pounds out of that gauge. So let's try the other side and see what it says. All right, let's try the other side, see what we got for compression there. All right, that one we got 120. So we can, by that test, we can tell one cylinder has got lower compression than the other. One's coming in at 90, the other one's coming in at 120. So we got something going on there. All right, we've gone through a few of our tests that we've done. We've looked over this sled cosmetically. It looks pretty good, really nice overall condition on the outside. It's been sitting for a while. We've done a compression test. We've noticed that one cylinder is down on compression a bit, which is kind of to be expected with this kind of mileage. I don't see any engine damage or anything by looking at the spark plugs. We've also found out that the carburetors need some attention due to all the mess that we've got. It's kind of leaking through the fuel bowl, which is pretty common for something that sits nowadays. And overall, it's pretty nice condition. We've checked our brake. We found out that it needs a little bit of attention. The pads and everything look all right, but the whole system probably needs to be flushed and go through that. And generally speaking, it's in really nice cosmetic shape. It doesn't look like it's been abused too much. So now you have a little bit of bargaining power and you know what you can expect if you do purchase this. Personally, if I was purchasing an old sled like this, which may happen, I would take the motor apart and put a big bore kit and do all that stuff. So the compression issue isn't a huge deal for me. The overall condition for me is kind of what I'm looking at. And yeah, so I hope that kind of helps you guys decide on what kind of purchase you're going to make, and depending on what you're looking for. If you're buying a sled that's in good running condition, I would make sure you would check all the functions of everything, make sure the lights and everything work, and your gas gauge and all that stuff. It doesn't hurt to open up the fuel tank, and if you have a flashlight, you can shine a light in there, see if there's a bunch of residue in there and stuff. Go underneath, have a look at the coolers, because these things have like a radiator tunnel coolers. Have a look there, see if there's any damage there. Go into your coolant, you know, just kind of check that. And I'll pull this hood open one more time because we didn't actually do that. We're going to open up the cooling system. We want to make sure we don't see, oh, there's pressure in there, which is a good thing. And yeah, we look in there. We don't see a bunch of oil or anything. It looks like antifreeze, so that's a good thing. And yeah, so now we know a lot about this sled. We only took a few minutes to actually go through it to do a quick cosmetic search, and everything cosmetically, this thing is in very nice shape, and it's going to need some attention with the engine and the carburetors and the braking system. So now you have a little bit of leverage and you have some good positive feedback on your testing, and you have a little bit of bargaining power, and you both know what you're up against. So I hope this kind of helps out. I'm going to carry on with this. I'm going to pull it right apart and go through and fix all these issues. But I hope this helps, and thanks for watching, and stay tuned.